From translation, TLB, the Living Bible. This 35th day of the year. Today we are reading passages Leviticus 11 to 13. Leviticus chapter 11, verses 1 to 47. And the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "Give the people of Israel these instructions. Of all the animals that live on land, these are the ones you may eat. You may eat any animal that has completely split hooves and chews the cud, but you must not eat the following animals that only chew the cud or only have split hooves: the camel, the rabbit, and the rock badger. For though they chew the cud, they don't have split hooves, so they are ceremonially unclean for you. And the rabbit chews the cud but doesn't have split hooves, so it is unclean for you. The pig has split hooves, but it doesn't chew the cud, so it is unclean for you. You may not eat the meat of these animals or even touch their dead bodies. They are ceremonially unclean for you. You may eat any animal that has split hooves and chews the cud. You may eat any kind of fish that has both fins and scales, but you must never eat anything that doesn't have both fins and scales, such as shrimp, crabs, or lobsters. These are unclean for you. You must never eat their meat or even touch their dead bodies. They are unclean for you. You may eat any kind of bird that is clean, but these birds you must never eat: eagles, vultures, kites, falcons, and owls, all kinds of hawks, all kinds of crows, ostriches, owls, seagulls, and all kinds of hawks, little owls, great owls, barn owls, swans, pelicans, cormorants, all kinds of herons, storks, and bitterns, and all kinds of hoopoes. You may eat all winged insects that walk on all fours, using their extra 2 legs as feet for hopping. But you may not eat the following kinds of winged insects that walk on all fours: locusts, grasshoppers, crickets, and katydids. All other winged insects that walk on all fours are unclean for you. You will become ceremonially unclean if you touch the dead bodies of any of these animals. Anyone who picks up their bodies must wash his clothes and bathe himself in water, and he will be unclean until evening. And if you touch their dead bodies, you will be unclean until evening. Any animal with paws, such as lions, tigers, leopards, bears, wolves, and weasels, is unclean for you. If you touch their dead bodies, you will be unclean until evening. And if you touch their dead bodies, you must wash your clothes and bathe yourself in water, and you will be unclean until evening. Also, any animal that has paws but doesn't have hooves is unclean for you. Anyone who touches their dead bodies will be unclean until evening. These are the animals that are unclean for you: mole rats, mice, lizards, geckos, and all kinds of great lizards. Anyone who touches their dead bodies must wash his clothes and bathe himself in water, and he will be unclean until evening. If any of these animals falls into a clay pot, the pot must be broken, and everything in it must be ceremonially unclean. And if such an animal falls into a spring or cistern, the water is defiled, and you must not use it for drinking. Any food that could be eaten but has come in contact with this water is also defiled, and any liquid that could be drunk from it is also defiled. Anything that the animal touched must be washed, and if it is a clay pot, it must be broken. If a spring or a cistern is the source of drinking water, it is clean, but if anyone has touched the dead body of an animal, the water is defiled and cannot be used. If any seed is planted in the soil, it remains clean even if the animal's body touches it. But if the animal has been washed with water, the seed is still clean, though the water has become unclean. If an animal that you are allowed to eat dies, anyone who touches its dead body will be unclean until evening. If you eat any of its meat, you must wash your clothes and bathe yourself in water, and you will be unclean until evening. If you carry its dead body, you must wash your clothes and bathe yourself in water, and you will be unclean until evening. You must not eat any animal that crawls on the ground, whether it swarms, walks, or moves on its belly. You must not eat any of these creatures, though they may die naturally. Anyone who touches their dead bodies will be unclean until evening. Do not defile yourselves by any of these creatures. Do not make yourselves ceremonially unclean by eating them or by touching their dead bodies. I am the Lord your God, and you must keep yourselves holy because I am holy. Do not defile yourselves by any of these creatures. For I am the Lord who brought you out of Egypt to be your God. You must therefore be holy, because I am holy. These are the regulations concerning animals, birds, and every living thing that moves in the water or on the ground. Their purpose is to distinguish between the clean and unclean, and between animals that may be eaten and animals that may not be eaten. Leviticus chapter 12, verses 1 to 8. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Give the people of Israel these instructions. A woman who becomes pregnant and gives birth to a son will be ceremonially unclean for 7 days, just as she is during her menstrual period. On the 8th day, the child must be circumcised. Then the mother must wait 33 days to be purified from her bleeding. She may not touch anything sacred or go to the sanctuary until her time of purification is completed. If she gives birth to a daughter, she will be unclean for 2 weeks, just as she is during her menstrual period. After that, she must wait 66 days to be purified from her bleeding. When her purification is completed, whether for a son or a daughter, she must bring a 1-year-old lamb for a burnt offering and a young pigeon or dove for a sin offering. She must bring them to the priest at the entrance to the tabernacle. The priest will present them before the Lord and make atonement for her, and she will be clean from her flow of blood. These are the regulations for a woman who gives birth to a boy or a girl. If she cannot afford a lamb, she may bring 2 doves or 2 young pigeons. One will be for a burnt offering and the other for a sin offering. The priest will make atonement for her, and she will be clean. Leviticus chapter 13, verses 1 to 59. Then the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "If anyone has a sore on his skin that looks like leprosy, he must be brought to the priest. The priest must examine the sore, and if it appears to be deeper than the skin and the hair in it has turned white, the priest must pronounce the person ceremonially unclean. But if the sore is white but doesn't appear to be deeper than the skin and the hair in it isn't turned white, the priest will quarantine the person with the sore for 7 days. On the 7th day, the priest will examine him again. If the sore is fading and hasn't spread on the skin, the priest must quarantine him for another 7 days. On the 14th day, the priest will examine him again. If the sore is fading and hasn't spread on the skin, the priest must pronounce him clean. It is a harmless rash, and he must wash his clothes and be clean. But if the sore continues to spread after he has been quarantined twice, he must be pronounced ceremonially unclean. If the sore spreads on his skin after he has been pronounced clean, he must be brought to the priest again. When a man has a serious burn on his skin, and the raw flesh of the burn becomes infected with a sore, the priest must examine it. If the hair in the sore has turned white and the sore appears to be deeper than the skin, it is a leprous infection. The priest must pronounce the person ceremonially unclean. But if the sore is white, without any hairs turned white, and appears to be no deeper than the skin, he must quarantine the person with the sore for 7 days. On the 7th day, the priest must examine the sore again. If the sore has spread on his skin, he must pronounce the person ceremonially unclean. But if the sore doesn't spread and has turned white, the priest must pronounce the person clean. The sore has healed and he is clean. But if a sore appears again on the person after he has been pronounced clean, the priest must examine it. If the sore has spread, he must pronounce the person unclean. It is a serious disease. But if the sore doesn't spread and remains white, it is only a scar from the burn, and the priest must pronounce the person clean. If a person has a sore on his skin that heals, and a white or reddish-white spot appears in the place where the sore was, he must be brought to the priest. The priest must examine it, and if the spot appears to be deeper than the skin and its hair has turned white, the priest must pronounce the person unclean. It is a leprous infection, and he is unclean. But if the spot is white without any hairs turned white and appears to be no deeper than the skin, the priest must quarantine the person with the spot for 7 days. On the 7th day, the priest must examine him again. If the spot is fading and hasn't spread on the skin, he must pronounce the person clean. It is only a rash, and he must wash his clothes and be clean. But if the spot continues to spread after the person has been examined twice, he must be pronounced unclean. If the spot remains white but doesn't spread and has faded, it is only a scar from the boil, and the priest must pronounce the person clean. If someone has a burn on his skin and a raw, unhealed spot appears in the place of the burn, the priest must examine it. If the hair in the spot has turned white and the spot appears to be deeper than the skin, it is a leprous infection. The priest must pronounce the person unclean. It is a serious disease. But if the spot is white without any hairs turned white and appears to be no deeper than the skin, the priest must quarantine the person with the spot for 7 days. On the 7th day, the priest must examine him again. If the spot is spreading, he must pronounce the person unclean. It is a leprous infection. But if the spot is white and doesn't spread and has faded, it is only a burn, and the priest must pronounce the person clean. The scar from the burn has turned white, and he is clean. If a man or woman has a sore on the head or chin, the priest must examine it. If the sore is scaly and appears to be deeper than the skin, and if the hair in the sore is thin and yellow, the priest must pronounce the person unclean. It is a serious skin disease on the head or chin. But if the sore is scaly, but doesn't appear to be deeper than the skin and the hair in it is normal, the priest must quarantine the person with the sore for 7 days. On the 7th day, the priest must examine the sore again. If it hasn't spread, and if it appears to be no deeper than the skin, he must shave the spot. But the spot itself is not infectious. It is only a rash. The priest must quarantine the person for another 7 days. On the 7th day, the priest must examine the sore again. If it hasn't spread, and if it appears to be no deeper than the skin, the priest must pronounce the person clean. He must wash his clothes, and he will be clean. But if the sore continues to spread after the person has been pronounced clean, the priest must examine it again. If the sore has spread, he must pronounce the person unclean. even though the sore doesn't have any white hair in it. If, however, the sore has stopped spreading and the hair in it has turned white, the person is clean. If a man has a bald spot on his head, he is clean. If a man has a bald spot on his forehead, he is clean. If a man has lost all his hair on his head, he is clean. If a man has lost his hair from the front of his head to the back, he is clean. But if he has a sore on the bald spot on his head, it is a serious skin disease. The priest must examine him. If there is a reddish-white sore in the bald spot of his head, it is a serious skin disease. The person has a serious skin disease and is unclean. The priest must pronounce him unclean, for his sores are unclean. The person with such a serious skin disease must wear torn clothes, let his hair be unkempt, cover the lower part of his face, and cry out, "Unclean, unclean." As long as he has the serious skin disease, he will be ceremonially unclean. He must live alone in a place outside the camp. If any clothing has a serious skin disease on it, such as mildew on woolen or linen clothing, or on woven or knitted cloth of linen or wool, or on leather, if the disease is greenish or reddish, it is a serious skin disease, and the priest must pronounce the clothing unclean. The priest must quarantine the clothing with the disease for 7 days. On the 7th day he must examine the clothing again. If the disease has spread, the garment is unclean, regardless of how it has been washed, and it must be burned. But if the disease hasn't spread, the priest must order the item to be washed, and he will quarantine it for another 7 days. After the clothing has been washed and examined again by the priest, if the disease hasn't spread, it is unclean, so burn it. The disease is a serious skin disease that has broken out in the fabric. If after washing the garment, the priest examines it again, and the disease has faded, he must tear out the affected part and wash the rest of the garment. If the disease breaks out again on the garment, it is a serious skin disease, so burn the garment. If the garment is washed and the disease doesn't reappear, it is clean, so wash it and it will be clean. These are the regulations for any garment with a serious skin disease, such as mildew in woolen or linen cloth, or in the woven or knitted fabric of linen or wool, or in leather. The purpose of these laws is to distinguish between what is unclean and what is clean. This is the regulation concerning the serious skin disease on clothing of wool or linen, either woven or knitted.